views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Welcome everyone, I'm your host Eileen Newman. We are joined in the studio today by members from two organizations with programs that help provide different levels of assistance to immigrant communities in the Bronx. Our first guest joins us today representing an organization that works with the Mexican and Latino population in the South Bronx. They work with families to create a sense of community that is civically engaged, empowered, and educated. Please welcome the Executive Director of MASA, Aracelis Lucero. Our next guest has dedicated her career to advocate for the rights of immigrant women. She works with the city agency that enforces the New York City rights law. This law prohibits discrimination in employment, housing, and public accommodations. Please welcome the Bronx Community Service Center Director of New York City Commission of Human Rights, Kajari Chaudhary. So I'm going to start with you and ask you about what your organization actually does. We did a little description, but it was sort of general.
Yes.
So, and I'd love to know also how long you've been around, how it started, a little bit of a background.
Okay, well, first, thank you so much for having me here. Always happy to share more about what we do at MASA. MASA actually was founded in 2001 by a group of students, and it was a group of Mexican-American students in CUNY, and they were fighting against the elimination of in-state tuition for undocumented youth. And slowly but surely, these students started recognizing other needs in the community that were related to education. And that's how MASA started, a volunteer-led organization with students. And so now we are happy to say that we've evolved and that now we offer programming that supports educational achievement and success from 16 months old all the way to college and beyond. And so what we do in our organization is we have two sorts of programming. One that supports the educational attainment of Latino and Mexican immigrant students and their families, and we accompany them through the process. And we always like to say that we partner with them because really the first teachers of the children that we work with are their parents. And so that's the second leg of our work, is working with families as a whole, as a unit. We also provide adult education programs to the parents that we serve. So a Spanish literacy class for parents that don't know how to read or write or that didn't finish their basic level of education in their home countries. And in addition, we provide an English language course. Those are educational programs. Next to that is our advocacy and civic engagement and leadership programs. And so for us, we understand that providing direct services and programs is definitely critical and addresses some of the short-term needs that our community faces, especially recently arrived immigrant Latinos. However, it's important for them to also be able to establish a long-term plan and also make their voices heard in the many spaces where they are needed. For example, in education, in the Department of Education, with their city council members, making sure that they voice their concerns and we provide parent leadership opportunities to do that. MASA also continues to be very community-led, although it now is a formally staffed organization. There's a lot of room for participation from parents, children, youth, and still the 100+ volunteers that we still have engaged within the organization. Myself, I'm a South Bronx native. I was born on Fox Street, and so I'm very happy to be able to give back to my community and continue to work with the immigrant community and where I come from.
I'm afraid to ask you how many people actually are employed there because I'm afraid the number will be so small for all the work you just described. But
So actually, we started out with about 3 employees in 2012 when Masa started growing, and now actually we have 9 full-time employees and about 8 part-time employees. And so the organization within the last 2 or 3 years has significantly evolved. But still, like you said, nonprofits still not enough staff, but we do the best we can.
And how many people do you service?
Well, last year's count, it was a total of 2,000 people. About 500 are directly involved in our direct service programs, so our after-school programs, our literacy programs for young people, our adult education programs, our family support programs, and leadership programs. The other numbers are advocacy organizing number, and the number of people we reach. We were able to reach last year with immigration help. We were providing DACA services to the community and helping them get their immigration status.
And you have 100 volunteers?
Yes, we have about 135 volunteers. Most of those volunteers actually do small group tutoring in our after-school program, and so we serve about 100 children in that program, and they get very small group tutoring sessions, 3-to-1 or even 2-to-1 ratio, and if necessary, 1-to-1 academic support tutoring.
And you're working with a much larger organization, so can you tell us a little bit about your work?
Sure. So we, as you mentioned, first thank you for having me on this show.
You're welcome.
And I am the Community Service Center Director for the New York City Commission on Human Rights. It is a city agency. It's a city agency that is in charge with upholding the New York City human rights law, which is one of the most comprehensive civil rights law in the country. And it fights discrimination based on 20 broad protected classes. And and since our conversation today is about immigrants, some of the protected classes are around race, religion, national origin, citizenship status. So the law, irrespective of where we come from, who we believe, what we believe in, or we don't believe in, and who we are, we as New Yorkers are all protected under the New York City human rights law. And our agency here in the Bronx, we're located on Arthur Avenue, 1932 Arthur Avenue. Our cross street is East Tremont. Our community service center here, the main thing that we do is education and outreach around the law. So we partner with other nonprofit organizations, faith-based organizations, schools, other community boards, council members' offices, to get the information out there for all Bronxites, for all New Yorkers, that this is our law, and we are here to ensure that you know our right, we all know our rights and our obligations under the law.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you both, and you know, talk together or separately about what are the biggest challenges you see for the communities that you work with.
So I can start by, I guess, saying because we work with mostly, and I think we're best at working with recently arrived immigrant communities, and immigrant parents really care about their children's education. It's really one of the primary concerns and ways that we support parents. How do you navigate the educational system in New York City, which is so vast, right? And so for anyone, it can be pretty confusing, let alone for someone that may not speak the language. And so that's one of the primary challenges that we see and why community members come to our office. The other one I would say is housing. Overcrowdedness in the South Bronx is a real issue, and landlords that don't respect the rights of their tenants who may or may not be undocumented and may have reasons to be afraid, really abuse that. And so no hot water, no gas at times has been issues that we've definitely dealt with and had to kind of sort of have a community-led approach with other organizations to tackle those issues. And the last is just status, immigration status, and all that that comes along with not having status and job implications and opportunities.
Right.
So those are my three.
Those are big enough to take on landlords. Well, if you think about it, you're taking on landlords, the educational system, and basically everything else that people could possibly need.
Yes.
So that's a lot of work.
Yes, and perhaps that's where we could come in, and we can talk after the show, how in terms of discrimination, like one of the areas that the law covers is housing. And typically, the landlord should not be discriminating against tenants based on one of the protected classes. And we often see is the fact that, landlords like refusing to do repairs or, not providing the hot water, and also like threatening to calling ICE. So that's also there as a part of the challenge and part of the discrimination. In terms of what we see for the immigrant populations, I mean, what we've just discussed, as well as the fact that a lot of people, we come from different parts of the world, and we often come from places where a law like the New York City human rights law is not in place.
Can I just interrupt you, because we have to take a short break, and I really want to delve into this. So we'll return with more Mission Bronx right after this.
Hello there, this is Sandra Apia. Be sure to tune in on BronxNet Thursdays at 8:30 p.m. to catch my brand new show, The Sandra Apia Show. See you then.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, Eileen Newman, and we're in the studio learning about two different organizations working to help better the lives of our immigrant population in the Bronx. And now I'm going to return to what we were talking about before. So let's continue that interesting conversation.
So, as you mentioned in my introduction, like I've been working with immigrant women, particularly for almost a decade now. And so one of the things that we see is, in my previous positions, what I often see is people come from different parts of the world. Like New York City, in so many ways is such a salad. But
nice.
Not the melting pot, but
right,
the
that's nice.
So we're coming from places where people are perhaps escaping very difficult situations back home, or are looking forward to like starting a new life in a better environment, giving their children a better future. So in many places that we are coming from, there are no parallel to the New York City human rights law. So what we see often is, for a lot of immigrant communities, we don't know that the law exists. And we are afraid to go to authorities because, again, of our past trauma. So, so that's one of the challenges, like making sure, and that is where, like, again, partnerships with CBOs, with other nonprofits, with smaller grassroots level organizations come into place, because that's how we will let all our Bronxites, all our New Yorkers know about the law and its existence, and what to do and how to fight discrimination in the city.
So following up on that, have you seen changes in where people are coming from? I mean, this is being asked by a woman who can barely leave her block. I've been in New York since I was born. Born in Brooklyn, lived in Queens, grew up in Queens, lived in Manhattan, worked in every borough. So I'm always astonished at people. They can come, and sometimes they don't know anybody. So this is amazing to me. So where are you seeing people? Is it the same, or are you seeing different populations, or?
So historically, for the people coming from Mexico, in general, it's been from a state called Puebla. And so there's even a saying that calls it Puebla York, right? What we've started to see more is shifts in people coming not only from Puebla, but also from the state of Guerrero in Mexico and Oaxaca. And in general, we're also getting more people that are coming from rural and indigenous speaking communities. So a lot of people coming that to our agency that speak Mixteco or Nahuatl or Zapoteco or Trapaneco. Those are the top 4 languages that we see at our center. But beyond that, in terms of the Latino population, we have been getting an influx also of Central American and South American populations. So Honduras, Guatemala, Ecuador, people from those countries who are migrating, and also for similar reasons, sometimes migrating for violence or also for poverty, for survival. And then in general, I think that there has been, or maybe we've just been more connected with the African community in the South Bronx. And also, as we were talking earlier, the Bangladeshi community in Parkchester. We don't reach that far up. Hopefully one day we will. We're mostly in the Mott Haven, Melrose area, but I think that those are some of the demographic shifts that we've seen and encountered lately.
And I would totally agree with you. One of the things that in the City Commission on Human Rights we've done is our agency is now, we would say, very reflective of New Yorkers. We went from a staff with like 6 language capacity to 26. Now, currently, I think our current count across the city is 26 languages that our staff speak. So that is, again, very reflective of like different people coming to New York from everywhere around the world. In the Bronx, our capacities has always been Spanish, but we also have language capacity in terms of Bengali, and we're looking to grow into the French-speaking area as well. But yeah, in terms of, I think what you discussed were some of the trends that we see.
How many languages do you speak?
I speak 3, but I read and write 2. I mean, apart from English.
Right. So what are they?
So Bengali, Hindi, and I speak and understand Urdu, but I don't read or write.
Yeah. How about you, Arthur?
Actually, I speak 3 languages. I wish I would say that one of them was an indigenous language, but it's Spanish, English, French, and I'm hopefully one day will either learn Nahuatl or Mixteco. I'm trying to get one of the parents to tutor me, but obviously time is of essence. But definitely a long-term goal of mine is to learn one of the indigenous languages.
That's very impressive. So let's talk a little bit about, so you both said people come because of poverty, because of violence. What are the expectations of people when they come? I mean, I know that in films, or at least older films, there's always the expectation of, oh, in America everything works, you know, you get, the streets are paved with gold, or at least it's easier and you can find jobs. But what are people really, what do they think when they think about coming? And then what happens?
I think it really depends on where you're coming from, and so when you're and the conditions that you're escaping. So if you're escaping violence and you're being threatened in your home country, and this could be in Mexico or in Central America, you're just happy to be in a safe place, and and it might be a little scary. And one of the things that we deal with mostly is just the immigration question, right? Making sure they show up to court, especially if they're minors. But I think the expectation is to work. The expectation, it's more challenging for the youth that we work with to try to keep them in school and help them understand that long term it's going to be better outcomes for them if they stay in school. But there's definitely a pressing need to send money back home if they left people back home, or just the expectation that the dollar in their home countries does stretch out, you know, significantly. And so we still see from recently arrived communities is there's this huge connection still with back home and with one day returning or establishing yourself. If you just
I'm just going to have to interrupt you. I'm sorry, but for our audience, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more. Welcome back. I'm your host, Eileen Newman, and we've been talking with Kadri, an advocate for the rights of immigrant women, and Aracelis, who works to provide a sense of community for the Mexican and Latino immigrants in the South Bronx. So let's go back to this idea of why people come, why they leave their country and come, and what their expectations are when they get here. So we were talking about work and safety.
So just to follow up on the last thing, and just highlighting the differences as to the expectations vary depending on the reasons for you coming. And if it's violence, and as we had stated previously, it's you're just happy to be here and you're just adjusting to life and you're happy to be in safe grounds. For people who are coming here, I think for reasons of poverty or for a better life for their children, and who do end up starting families here, finding a job, and most of the time there's probably already a community that they can arrive to. It's been very few people that I say we've seen that just come alone and don't have somewhere to arrive or have a connection to somebody in the city. However, there may be times where they still feel alone, and having an organization like MASA just help support them with navigating systems, even if they don't get a direct service, but connecting them to other organizations and opportunities that may be available. And New York City has done a lot to try to provide new opportunities for immigrant communities and programs. And so the expectation of work is definitely one, and the expectation of having their children receive a better education is definitely another one. But in general, there isn't really a concrete plan besides the saving money and sending money back to their home countries. And that's just been from my experience what I've seen.
Yeah, how about you?
No, I mean, this is, we represent two very different, we come from very different parts of the world originally, and yet the expectations and, the thoughts behind migration, the thoughts of like the future are just same. It's same across, like, whether people are coming from central Mexico or they're coming from Bangladesh. So that's, I think, like one of the beautiful things about the space that, the United States or even New York provides for everyone. Like that hope, that future, the future for themselves, for ourselves, for our children. So that hope is there, and that hope is for, like, it's across communities.
And then I think also people have referred to migration as a human right, right? You're trying to access your livelihood and your survival and a better space for yourself and your family. So I love that actual saying that migration is a human right.
Yeah. So I remember once going to a meeting with, it was around healthcare issues in a community, and that potentially the space that people go into was closing. But what we started to get into was, or what the panel and the people actually there got into, was this whole idea of there were women who had teenage children. It was mostly women, and it was a painful conversation about how they felt that they were losing their children, because for the children who were going to school, they could be much more involved with sort of American mores, if we call it that. Can you address that, or have you seen it, or what's
we try to mitigate that, is what my response is. We definitely see some sort of power shift or dynamics between American-born children of Mexican descent and their parents. They're brokering language, other opportunities for their parents. However, at MASA, and with the help of our parent community, we really try to reel in our children back into a space of, exposing them to their culture. It's okay. We want them to take advantage of all the opportunities and join clubs and do American football and do all of these other great things that this country has to offer. But at the same time, having parents and the kids and the young people that we work with recognize the many strengths that their families already came with. And so this summer, actually, we launched the Mexican American Studies program. It's a 6-week program that pretty much taught them everything from Mesoamerica and the different indigenous communities that existed, and the evolution of and everything from Chicano studies and things that they normally wouldn't be exposed to between the 6th and the 9th grade. And so one of the primary things that parents always say is they want to make sure that their kids keep their culture. So we still celebrate Mexican Independence Day, Dia de Muertos, Children's Day, which is a general Latin American holiday. And so I think parents have become a little bit more at ease when they see their children learn more about their culture, but at the same time are starting to feel like they have to let go, and there's things that their children need to do in order to make it.
Yeah.
I can definitely see that as well as a parent to child raising kids here. Like, I mean, that is something that's a constant struggle. As a parent, that I often, my husband and I face always, like, how much they are American kids, but at the same time, what is their connection to their roots? So it's a struggle, and I can see how communities across would be facing the same, and it's our daily reality.
Yes, and I think in the school system too, and other spaces, and I know the Bangladeshi community also has a celebration in Parkchester, and so I think as long as communities and partners are doing the best they can to celebrate culture and the diversity of the city, that we're in some kind of a good track, and then it all blends together at the end of the day anyway.
Yeah. So we're starting to run out of time, but we do have a little bit more to ask. So what are your biggest challenges? We've talked about people coming in and interacting with you, but you're both working in agencies that are dealing with really trying to make people's lives better. So what are the challenges that you feel doing this work?
I guess organizationally, just growing and sustaining. You work for the Center for Bronx Nonprofits, and so I'm sure you know of all those challenges.
Yes.
But aside from that, I guess it's just, even with our mission and the civically engaged part, and something that was alluded to earlier, what we're used to in our home countries, and being able to participate here has definitely been a challenge. And so that's something that the organization continues to work with, and trying to push our community members, whether undocumented or documented, to raise their voices, to not live in fear. So that's going to be a continued struggle, especially in this political environment that we're facing at the time.
That's a whole other show. That's a rant, I think.
And I don't know if you would like to share.
I mean, yes, I mean, with the city, again, we just want to ensure that all our communities, irrespective of from where we are coming from, have access to these services, and know that discrimination in any form is not going to be tolerated in New York City. And then we need to get there, both in terms of people knowing their rights and folks knowing their obligations, and in that way we can make our city free of discrimination for everyone.
That is a perfect way to end. So unfortunately, that's all we have time for, but I want to thank you both, because you've been wonderful to talk to. So, and thank our guests, and also thank you, the viewer, for tuning in. If you missed any part of today's episode, or you would like to check out past episodes of Mission Bronx, go to www.bronxnet.tv under BronxNet Specials, and we'll see you next time for another edition of Mission Bronx.